Morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us this morning in this special meeting for the bylaw revisions. First, I'll call the meeting to order. We don't establish quorums in this type of meeting, so we just call the meeting to order. ASNT's bylaws, Article 7, titled Amendments and Revisions, requires the board chair conduct a special meeting of the members prior to any board of directors vote to adopt a bylaws amendment or revision to allow members to question or comment on the proposal. The next slide, please. Thank you. This meeting is to review the 6 bylaw revisions proposed by the executive committee on the 17th of May, 2023, and to allow members to comment on and question the proposal. The board of directors took up the proposal in its meeting on the 17th of June and again on the 13th of July, 2023, at which time they voted to consider the proposal. Following the procedure prescribed in the bylaws, ASNT published the details of the proposed revision to the members through email, through our website, and through the materials evaluation beginning on July 17th, 2023. In accordance with Article 7, Section 1, members shall have no less than 60 days to submit questions and comments about proposed revisions, to which the secretary shall respond and to which the board of directors shall consider prior to any board of directors vote to adopt the amendment or revisions. Excuse me. The comment period closed on September 15th, 2023, with several comments having been received. Responses to all members' questions and comments have been posted on the ASNT's website. I shall now review with you the proposed revisions. Please hold your comments and questions until the end of the presentation. Slide 3, proposed revision number 1 is to change the title of the senior staff position from executive director to chief executive officer, as contained in bylaws Article 3, Section 2. The rationale for this change is to make the title more accurately depict the duties and responsibilities of the position and to be consistent with current association practices. Under our structure, the executive director has profit and loss and strategic plan implementation responsibilities for a $10 million international business with 3 subsidiary units. In addition, they serve as ASNT spokesperson and primary representative to the industries. In a comparison with other member-based STEM societies, we found that our closest peers, along with the majority of other technical societies compared, use the title of CEO or a hybrid CEO/ED for their senior staff position. A minority of technical societies still use the executive director or other terminology, but the trend clearly is going from ED to CEO. The executive committee does not intend to change to convey a promotion for the current executive director. Rather, it's intended to reflect the actual duties and responsibilities of the senior staff position and to bring ASNT's practices in line with current practices in comparable societies. Next slide. Proposed revision number 2 is to change the title of director at large to director, as contained in the bylaws Article 3, Section 2. Under ASNT's former governance practices, we adopted the term director at large to distinguish directors elected by the members from those elected by the councils. And you'll recall we used to have council directors. Further, the terminology conveyed intentionally or otherwise differences in roles and responsibilities and constituent representation. With the elimination of council directors and the adoption of contemporary board practices, which requires directors to represent the full society rather than any subsidiary constituent group which elected them, the executive committee proposes to standardize terminology to be director by eliminating the reference to at large. Next slide, please. Thank you. Proposed revision number 3 is to add the president of the ASNT Foundation to the board of directors as contained in bylaws Article 3, Section 2. This is to remain consistent with our precedent by appointing a senior volunteer officer of ASNT subsidiaries to the ASNT board. For example, the president of ASNT Certification Services, LLC, is a voting member of the ASNT board by virtue of holding that position. Adding the president of the ASNT Foundation as a voting member, therefore, is consistent with that precedent. The executive committee notes that while the individuals currently holding these positions were elected directors of the ASNT board, this may not always be the case, as the board has the authority to appoint anyone to those two positions. Proposed revision number 4 is to delegate authority for the board of directors to appoint one director each year as contained in bylaws Article 3, Section 3. While ASNT has recently benefited from a renewed interest in serving on the board of directors, there remains the challenge of ensuring the board has access to specific skills, knowledge, and abilities necessary to govern a growing international society. For example, should the board determine it needs someone with deep experience in this, with deep experience in a specific international market, the only way to ensure such a person is elected by the members is by gaming the nominations and election processes. 2 examples include nominating a slate, which is an example 5 nominees for 5 positions, containing a person with said qualifications, thereby removing the choice from the members, or by stacking the nominations with multiple similar people to ensure the members have no choice but to elect one of them. We do not believe gaming the system is appropriate, and it would have unintended consequences. Instead, XCOM proposes the bylaws be revised to delegate authority to the board of directors to appoint one director each year. Practice of the board electing their own members is not unusual. Other societies appoint independent directors to their boards to provide outside perspectives. Independent directors could be leaders from other societies, lawyers, financial experts, or even market experts. This authority would be discretionary. The ASNT board could appoint a director each year if it chose to, but it would not be required to. XCOM believes delegating this authority to the board of directors would benefit the society by retaining the integrity of its nominations and election system while providing some flexibility to bring it necessary and appropriate expertise. Proposed revision number 5 is to reduce the number of directors elected by the voting members from 5 to 4 each year, as contained in bylaws Article 3, Section 3. Presently, there are 19 voting directors, including 15 directors at large, 3 elected officers, and the immediate past chair. This number will vary year to year by 1 or 2 directors, depending on when directors are elected to vice president. To avoid increasing the size of the board because of delegating authority to the board to elect one director each year, as it was described in revision 4, the executive committee proposes to reduce the number of directors elected by the voting members each year by 1, from 5 to 4. This action would result in a maximum of 21 voting directors, including 12 member elected directors, up to 3 board-appointed directors, the immediate past chair, the president of the ASNT Certification Services, LLC, president of the ASNT Foundation, and the board chair, president, and vice president. This is a maximum number. The number of directors will vary depending on who is appointed president and the 2 subsidiaries in which each year their term director is elected to vice president. Proposed revision number 6 is to add the president of the ASNT Certification Services LLC to the executive committee as contained in bylaws Article 5, Section 2. Prior to the last bylaws revision, XCOM was composed of 5 people, including 4 voting elected officers, which are the chair, the president, the vice president, and the secretary treasurer, and non-voting executive director. With the change of making secretary and treasurer separate, which are appointed non-voting positions, it resulted in a reduction of the number of voting elected officers to 3. In addition, XCOM finds that many of the discussions involve certification programs representing almost 40% of ASNT's business, and which are governed by the certification services subsidiary. Therefore, XCOM recommends the president of the ASNT Certification Services LLC be added to the executive committee, bringing the number of voted elected persons to 4, including the non-voting officers, which are the executive director, the secretary, and the treasurer. The executive committee would then be comprised of a total of 7 people. Next slide. Thank you. So these are the 6 proposed revisions. I will now entertain questions from the members. Please raise your hand in Teams to indicate that you have a question or submit your question in a chat message, and the secretary will call on you in order. I will either answer the questions myself or I will ask the executive director to answer. Motions will not be recognized since we have not determined a quorum.
Thank you, Danny. We have Michael McGloin with his hand raised with a question.
Michael?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I may have asked in June when I was still on the board, but I can't remember. Was it considered to add the president of the ASNT Foundation to the executive committee?
It was considered. We actually discussed it at XCOM, and I believe we may have discussed it in when we were in Seagrove. Neil, do you remember?
Yes, we did discuss it with the full board, and ultimately we decided not to include the foundation in the executive committee, primarily because it's a relatively small amount of the business of ASNT, and we felt that the number of 4 voting officers would be sufficient for the purposes of XCOM. So the discussion was had, and it was chosen that we would not include the foundation in the XCOM at this time.
Okay, but as it grows, I guess it could change then.
Entirely possible, in my opinion.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have any other questions?
I don't see any hands raised or any questions or comments in the chat at this time.
Okay, so at this point in time, since there are no other questions, we will be posting the recording here on the website. And even though the comment period is technically closed, you always, as a member, have the opportunity to ask volunteers questions, or the staff for that matter, and feel free to reach out and contact us. Now, the board will be addressing this issue. Danny, you want to address this?
So, yeah, the board will consider all of the comments and questions, those that have been turned in the 60 days prior, and any questions we had today, and anything we get between now and then. In our board meeting on October 23rd, as with all ASNT bylaw amendments and/or revisions to be adopted, the proposal requires a 2/3 majority approval by the board of directors. There's no other questions. I will consider this meeting now adjourned. Thank you,
very
everyone.
much.